Hi, welcome to the Sonrise Pastors Podcast. Today's episode is really engaging. I think it's really relevant to what's happening as a current trend in the church. And we're talking about how should Christians deal with anti-Semitism and should Christians support the modern state of Israel or not. And I'm joined by Dr. Joe Fuiten, who has been a pastor in our area in the Pacific Northwest for many years at Cedar Park. He helped start Cedar Park Christian schools and many ministries that came out of that church. And he has taken many trips to Israel. He's been a student of the scriptures of foreign policy. He also runs pastorspicks.com to give people Christian voting guides for how to look at local elections and officials that are running for office in the Snohomish and King County area primarily. And we have a great conversation about biblical theology and what should form our thinking as it relates to the Jewish people and the state of Israel. So I think you'll enjoy this episode. As usual, if you like it, please share it with somebody, help spread the word about it. And we'd love to get questions from you, so feel free to write us, mail at isunrise.org if you have any questions. Hope you enjoyed this episode today. So how many years did you pastor at Cedar Park?
Oh, I started in May of 1981.
Okay.
And I went to emeritus status in 2016.
Okay.
So a lot of years.
A lot of years.
About 35 years, I guess.
81. I was a 1-year-old.
Yeah,
in
well,
81. I was a newborn.
Your whole life.
My whole life. Yeah. Wow. And for everybody listening, Pastor Joe is actually the father-in-law of Pastor Dr. Craig Gortz, who's on our staff as our executive pastor. And so you guys go way back, of course.
Yes, we do. Yeah. And Craig is enjoying his time here. And
yeah.
And I think he's a smart guy.
Yeah, he is.
I like to work with Craig because if I had a problem, I just sicked him on it.
Yeah.
Let him solve the problem.
And he'd take care of it.
Yeah.
That's right.
He was good in that department.
And we love Roz being here too.
Yeah,
She's
absolutely
a very sweet woman of God
yeah.
and a wonderful blessing to us. So
yeah, she is.
Yeah.
She's a smart lady. She was the number 2 in 2 different categories at Snohomish High School.
Oh, wow.
Highest academics in two fields.
Oh, cool.
She's got a good brain.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So it's always fun to learn something new about the people around us. And you also, of course, you kind of had a parish model at Cedar Park, right? So you helped birth the funeral home or mausoleum and some other ministries related. The Christian school also started under your leadership. Isn't that right?
Well, I kind of took the view that I was there to pastor Puget Sound, and there was a lack of services in the larger Christian community in certain areas. So I started Cedar Park Christian School in 1982 because there weren't really Christian schools available. And now it's become the largest private school in Washington State.
Yeah, amazing.
But the same with the funeral home is that there weren't really any Christian organizations that were doing funeral services. In fact, Cedar Park became the only church with an actual funeral home in it. And now Paul Putnam is the director of that, and he's doing a great job.
Yeah.
But it serves the wider Christian community.
Yeah.
It has its own identity, its own operation, and we serve a lot of churches. And it's become the most prominent funeral home in on the east side, and so they're very, very successful. And but part of that was I wanted in all of those ministries, I wanted them to be inexpensive, and so Cedar Park Christian School was always the least expensive school, and Chapel of the Resurrection is you hate to say it this way, but it was the cheapest way to get buried.
Okay.
And that was an important value to me actually. Because funerals can be very expensive,
right?
And I wanted something, that was inexpensive.
Right.
In fact, I'll just tell you a funny story about that. So, I'm dreaming about how to do burials cheap, right? Because I started it, and I originally was the seller of the plots and everything, So I did the whole thing. I was the only one. And so I'm thinking, how can I make this cheaper and still make it Christian, And so I developed this idea. I said, what I'll do is I'll invent a casket that goes inside of another casket. So a cheap casket that goes inside of a nice casket.
Oh, wow.
And then I'll have the nice casket. I'll have a Christian pall that will go over it, which is a cloth. I have some beautiful cloths that I purchased in Damascus, Syria, with crosses and different things. Anyway, so I thought, if I can do it like this, I think I can save people a lot of money. And so I laying awake night thinking about it, and finally I decided I'd go up to the Puget Sound Casket Company. So I did, went up there to see him. I said, hey, I have this idea. I'd like to have a cheap casket that I can put inside of a expensive casket, and then take the cheap casket out with time for and then bury people in the cheap casket, which is what I'm going to be buried in, right? And so I explained to them my idea and how it was created and all that, and they listened very intently. And after a while, they said, "Yeah, we have some of those." It's kind of disappointing, when your genius idea, you weren't the first one. They already had it. We're using it, So, but anyway, that was.
Was part of that you saw a need in the community that maybe wasn't being met for families, but I know from talking to Craig at different times that you also did a lot of reading in church history, and you've read through all the volumes of the church fathers. Did your study of ancient Christianity inform your value for wanting to honor the death process for Christians?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because Christians have always paid a lot of attention to burial. Yeah. When Stephen, the first Christian martyr, was stoned in Jerusalem, the scripture says righteous men buried Stephen. Yeah. Righteous men. I mean, why do you need a righteous man to bury somebody? Right. But so it's all in Christianity, burial has always been considered a righteous act. And so to properly bury someone. Right. And so Christians have always been interested in properly burying, giving them proper due. Right. And when I was a college student, I traveled with a band and a choir in Europe for 6 weeks, and I visited a lot of churches. We did some concerts in churches and cathedrals. And what you notice there is that there are people buried in the churches, and certainly they're buried outside the churches in the churchyard. Yeah. And so I thought, someday if I ever have a chance, I'm going to do that. Yeah. Well, when I became a pastor, I had that chance. Yeah. And but I have to say that not everybody was equally enthralled with that dream as I was. Oh yeah. And so actually I took a long time. I would just tell the board, I'd say, look, one of these days I'd love to build a cemetery. Right. As long as you're saying it's one of these days, I don't feel the need to fight you on it, right? Yeah. But if you say, now today I'd like to build one. Okay, now we got a different issue. And so I would every year or so I'd bring it up to the board. Yeah. Just mention that someday I'd like to do that. And then I bought the law, got a copy of all the laws in the state of Washington on the subject. So I read up on that and got all the details. Well, finally, it was long. We acquired a new piece of property, and as part of the acquisition of that property, we needed to be able to fund it. Yeah. And so I thought I can do this cemetery as a funding mechanism. So anyway, we got a $2.5 million gift to the church of property. And so to vote because we're a congregational form of government, when we voted to receive that big chunk of property, I included the resolution to build build a cemetery on it. Right. And so who's going to vote against a $2.5 million gift, right? Yeah. And so, but it was all this it was like the Congress does. They just lump a whole bunch of stuff together, and so it passed, and so we were able to. I guess you can use the whole idea of pork to your advantage sometimes. In a bill. Yeah. But anyway, we were able to get started on it with good support of the congregation, and even some of the people who were less thrilled eventually came to think it was a good idea. And so today it is a good idea. Right. Well, I don't want to go too deep into church history with you because I've been enjoying reading more of the fathers and history, but that'll take us into a whole nother topic. But it caught my interest a little bit when you were bringing up the topic, and it's fun for people to get to know a little bit more about you and what you've done. Just to go a little further in terms of church history on that, in the Reformation, Calvin decided that burying in the church was not a good thing. And so they literally banned it in Scotland. Wow. And for him, it sounded too Catholic. And they were in the fight with the Catholics. Catholics did that. So if they did that, then we're not going to do that. Yeah. And so they literally made it illegal And he even said you cannot say a prayer at a funeral.
Oh, wow.
That was too Catholic.
Huh.
So those were some of the excesses of the Reformation.
Yes.
Because if you form your theology out of a fight, it's not good.
I know.
So just let the Bible be the Bible and go with that, and it's not a weapon.
Right.
It's the Bible.
Yeah, and it does seem like as Protestants, I mean, that's our feature is also our detriment sometimes. We just keep protesting. It's like we just want to be so anti-something.
Yeah, well, the Reformation has been over for 500 years.
Yeah.
And so it's time to get back to biblical theology.
That's right.
Not Reformation theology.
Yeah.
Although on my next trip, I'm going to visit Germany.
Yeah.
And I'm going to visit some of the Reformation sites.
Oh, wonderful.
Never done that in my life.
Wow.
I want to do that. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thankful for definitely some aspects of the resurrection, but I think, it's better to be a historic Christian that is contending for the faith once for all delivered to the saints.
Exactly.
Not in 1500, but in the 30s AD when it first started.
Yeah. Well, I call that biblical theology versus systematic theology.
Right.
Because if you follow biblical theology, there's going to be some tensions.
Yep.
I'm doing James chapter 2 in my next study tonight, and there you have, faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
Well, Martin Luther didn't think that should be in the Bible.
Right.
He thought James should not be in the Bible.
Yeah, he was pretty strong on that.
Yeah. So because he was all about grace, and I'm all about grace, but I'm also about works.
Yes.
That faith without works doesn't amount to anything.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh no, I agree with you. I am a fan of biblical theology over systematics and letting the Bible inform our theology instead of our own categorizations.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the real reason I wanted to bring you in, and I'm so thankful that you could join us today, was to talk about the rise of anti-Semitism in Christianity. And it's I don't know how active you are on social media or not, but with a lot of young people and probably people of all ages, there's several conservative voices that have started to become more critical of Israel, and then even within conservative politics, within like the Make America Great Again, the MAGA movement, I've heard kind of like negative claims by some of the people, like the I don't know, influencers or pundits or different news kind of platform type people, cultural commentators that have said things like, Make America Great Again isn't about, MAGA's not about America, it's about Israel, and like Trump's selling you a bill of goods, he doesn't care about America first, he cares about Israel first. And I've been hearing certain people like Tucker Carlson, and I don't follow a lot of these people real actively personally. I try to pay attention to pretty big trends and like different voices on the right and left, but I don't follow them real closely. But he platformed a guy, I don't even remember his name, that believes that Churchill was the real villain of World War II and that Hitler was trying to purify Germany from the atheistic Jews and was trying to bring good reform. And so there's kind of become a movement within conservatism and the right that is saying, yeah, Hitler wasn't that bad. There's a rise of some neo-Nazism starting to happen again, white supremacy, and some things that I think are really dangerous to conservatism, to Christianity, to America. And with all this controversy stirring up, some of the statements that people have been making are like, no enemies to the right. So, there's all these leftist ideologies of communism and the LGBTQIA plus mafia. They're the real danger to our kids, the trans movement, the drag queen story hour. So we should befriend anybody that's to the right of us because we got to fight these radical leftists. So these are just a lot of the talking points I'm hearing. But the thing that I'm most concerned about is how many Christians, and especially younger Christians, are kind of getting sucked into this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel narrative. And of course, if they're getting sucked into white supremacy or neo-Nazism, that's even a further danger for their own soul and for the purity of the Christian faith. But anyhow, I wanted to talk to you about anti-Semitism and should Christians support Israel. So I just kind of dumped a lot of different things that are related, but
I agree with 100% with all of that.
Yeah,
I'm with you on it.
Yeah. So I guess I would say, what for you as a Christian, as a And what was your doctorate in, by the way?
Well, it's in ministry.
In ministry, yeah. But you've studied theology and history and taught from the Bible for years. And I know you also have a love for Israel. You've spent a lot of time there. How many trips have you taken?
Well, I've done 20 trips.
20 trips?
My 21st coming up
in
April.
Wow. Yeah. So I know you have a love for Israel and the Jewish people and a love for the scriptures. What would you say is like, if somebody asks you, and this is what was asked me by a young man recently, who I think he's getting these videos and things in his social media timelines, and he says, do you think we as Christians should support the state of Israel? What would be your answer to that?
Well, if you want a biblical answer, I think what we should support what God is supporting, and agree with God. That's what I try to do, and so I don't try to agree with a conservative or a Republican or a MAGA. I agree with God, and to the extent that those others agree with God, then I'm on their team.
Right.
I mean, truthfully, I am a Republican, have been all my life. I was chairman of the College Republicans when I was a college student in Oregon, so I have that history, and my undergraduate degree is in political science, and so that whole thing has been a love, and I specialized in foreign policy. And so, in fact, when I was in high school, I did a TV program in Portland on Channel 2 on the refugee problem. They had to do current events in those days, and I was selected as a high school student to speak, do a 30-minute, I think it was, or maybe an hour program on television on the refugees from the '67 war.
Oh, wow.
So it does go back a ways. Well, some of these voices have kind of lost their way, in my opinion. I agree. I think Tucker Carlson is one who has lost his way. I was a fan of him early on, not when he was at CNN, but when he was early on when he was at Fox. But he really went off the rails even when he was at Fox. He was very much anti-Ukraine, and it seemed to me pro-Russian. And he had a guy named McGregor that he had on who was just a crazy man, in my opinion. Tucker Carlson has called Zelensky a slimy rat and different things like that. And the fact that Zelensky is a Jew, those things have been raised, is whether there's a little bit of an element of, because the terminology that Tucker Carlson uses for Zelensky is right out of the Nazi playbook, actually.
Oh, wow.
And, Putin calls him a Nazi and, that whole thing. So, I think that I have not appreciated the way he's drifted in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I think he's drifted in a bad direction and influenced other people in that same direction. But so if you're going to go with the Bible, then so the question is, what does the Bible say?
Yeah.
And what the Bible says, it goes back to Abraham.
Yep.
In the book of Genesis, God promised the land of Israel to Abraham. And then he reaffirmed it to Isaac.
Yeah.
And then he reaffirmed it to Jacob. And so the land, and God said there in Genesis 11, 12, in that area, he said, this is going to be yours forever.
Yeah.
It's a forever kind of promise that it goes to Abraham. And so it's Abraham, and then Isaac, but not Ishmael, and Jacob, but not Esau.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're a descendant of Abraham, it's that they are the children of the promise of Abraham.
Yeah.
So the promise was to Abraham, then to Isaac, not Ishmael, and then to Jacob, and not Esau.
Right.
And in each case, and all of that happened at Bethel.
Yeah.
At the same place. And from Bethel, you can look out all over the mountains of Israel. You can see into the Jordan River Valley. You can see basically from the Jordan to the Mediterranean from Bethel. It's a high point of the land. And so the promise was made to them. So and by the way, it was a border. There were borders connected to it. And so God gave them a land that was specified. As far as you can see, it's going to be yours. So that is the promise. So that's what God said. And so when I support the land belonging to the people that God promised it to.
Yeah.
I am being faithful to the word of God.
Right.
And to that original promise owing to Abraham. When I was at university, I had a professor who was British, Peter Mansfield, and after he left our university, went to head up the Arab League.
Oh, okay.
Head up their PR department because he had worked for the London Times and all. But anyway, he was relatively pro-Arab, and so I took politics of the Middle East and economics of the Middle East from him. But anyway, so I was having lunch with him one day in the student center, and he was giving me the Abraham thing. He said, well, the Arabs are children of Abraham too.
Yeah.
And so why shouldn't they be given, why don't they have an equal right to it since they're also children of Abraham? But it's not that they're children of Abraham, because they are. Most Arabs are descended from Abraham as well. Not all, but most, or many, let's say. But it's the promise. The promise is to Abraham, reiterated to Isaac, reiterated to Jacob.
Yeah.
That's why we call them the children of promise.
Right.
The promised land. That's the Holy Land. Israel is called the promised land.
Yeah.
Well, who made the promise? God did.
Yep.
To whom was the promise made? To Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their descendants. And the language is forever.
Forever. Yeah.
That it doesn't run out, and it's not conditioned, because there are those who say, well, they haven't been faithful.
Right.
And so, but I think they're wrong about that for biblical reasons also.
Yeah. I've been hearing some of the guys there's some groups, and I like a lot of what they teach. TheosU, it's become a really a popular online platform for teaching people theology, and they're kind of they're a little bit diverse in their online faculty, but I would say they're like Pentecostal, charismatic, Reformed, and they tend to lean more replacement theology. So I've heard guys that have been, and they've got quite a bit of influence with younger, kind of contemporary, spirit-filled Pentecostal churches. A lot of the mega churches that are spirit-filled are pretty. They're promoting these guys quite a bit and partnering with them quite a bit. So I've noticed guys that have been around there thinking. I've heard them say things lately like, "Oh well, the promise was given to Abraham, not to the nation of Israel." And so I think what they're trying to say is, and I know it's always dangerous when you judge people by their sound bites, or when you try to make a major theological statement with just like a 30-second sound bite. But I think what they're trying to say is that, well, Christians are children of Abraham too by faith, and it's really anybody that believes by faith, and the land is really about Christ being the fulfillment of everything in his eternal kingdom. And I know you're familiar with replacement theology pretty well. I'm confident that you are. But how would you respond to somebody that says, well, the promise is to Abraham and his spiritual children of promise, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the modern state of Israel?
Well, I think that's incorrect. It is to the nation of Israel. In Jeremiah, when they're getting ready to go into the Babylonian captivity, Jeremiah 31, I believe it is. They're going into the Babylonian captivity, the 70 years and all of that.
Yeah.
And what God says to them is, you're going into captivity, but I have good plans for you.
Yeah.
And the plans are to restore you to the land of Israel.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely the Jewish people. And the restoration, it's a reiteration of the promise.
Yeah.
To Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but it is connected to the land.
Right.
And so it's not to the spiritual descendants, but it's to the literal descendants of Abraham. And they're promised to return to the land. And it is not conditioned on their obedience. So the replacement theology would say, that because Israel was disobedient to God, therefore the promise was removed from them and given to those who will be true with him.
Yeah.
But when God made the promise through Jeremiah, they were disobedient. That's why they went into captivity.
Right.
They were not living right. They were not doing right. And so they were fiercely judged for, with a great loss of life and loss of the land for 70 years. But even with their disobedience, the promise was not lifted.
Yeah.
It remained. And so they could come back to the land that God had given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yeah.
And so even when they were disobedient. So disobedience has not removed Israel from the promises that God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yeah.
Now, you can certainly say that Christians have been grafted in.
Yeah.
You know, and so
we should, right? According to Romans 11.
Absolutely.
And
we are part of the spiritual family, if you will.
The church is one new man of Jew and Gentile, so we're yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't negate the promises to national Israel.
Right.
Because it's to the nation that the promises are reiterated as you move through the Scripture. And that has been the pattern, you know, that God has followed.
Right.
You see it through the judges, you know, that, you know, they have all these judges. You know, Israel would do good for, you know, a generation or two, and then they'd start worshiping idols, and God would bring judgment on them, but they were still the people of God, you know, and they still had certain promises that were to them. So they were restored to them, if you will.
So is there any go-to scriptures that have helped you combat replacement theology that you believe make a strong case for the land and the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob still being literally fulfilled?
Well, you know, first of all, let me go back to the idea of who doesn't support Israel and their claim.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't believe in the millennium,
right?
If you're an amillennialist, or you don't believe in the rapture, then those two spiritual views, they correspond almost directly with whether or not God still has a plan for Israel, even in their disobedience. Because, you know, truthfully, Israel is not a terribly religious country.
Right.
I mean, they're definitely not Christian, but they're not really into Judaism either. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is. It's been years ago that I read it, as French newspaper Le Monde said that 80% of Jews are either atheist or agnostic.
Wow.
And I don't know what the number is today. That was 3 or 4 decades ago. But the point is, they're not a religious people.
Yeah.
I mean, they have all the history.
Yeah.
But they're a strange group. I was in Israel. I had this guide named Philip. He was actually a driver and a guide. He had been a tank driver in one of the wars, and he was an atheist. So he's a guide. You know, he's one of my guides. He's guiding me around Israel, the holy sites and everything. And so I said, okay, you're an atheist, you know, whatever. I mean, that's been generally the way it is. I mean, I've had an Arab guide. I've had atheist guides. I've had the mix. You know, you get everything. Yeah. So anyway, we go to the Western Wall. And I look over there, and there he is at the Western Wall praying. And so afterward I said, hey, Philip, I thought you told me you were an atheist. What were you doing over there at the wall with your head bowed, you know, praying? He says, I don't know. When I go to the wall, I pray. You know, but he doesn't believe in God.
Right.
But that's Israel. Yeah. You know, they have this religious kindness, but they really don't believe.
Yeah.
But the spirit of supplication is going to come upon them in Zechariah 12, and they will be restored in time. And therefore, God's promises will be given to those who are restored. But, and so, you know, I think you have to go back. The go-to promise is that the promises of the land are forever. Yeah. And they are not conditional upon obedience. Right. Some things are conditional on obedience, like blessing is conditioned on obedience, and Israel is not really being blessed at the moment. You know, they've had nothing but trouble their whole existence since 1948. You know, I mean, I've prayed for them, and I think God has actually helped them on more than one occasion. I had an occasion once to meet with Ehud Omer. In 2005, he was a prime minister of Israel. He was he was second in command at the time. Ariel Sharon had sent him to the United States to try to build support for Israel in the Christian community. Oh, okay. And so I had a chance to meet with him, with a group of Christian leaders, met with him, and Jewish leaders, and he was not a good guy. and he isn't a good guy today, Ehud Omer. He went to jail for corruption eventually.
wow.
But anyway, and so he's trying to explain to us why we all ought to support Israel in giving back Gaza, because he was in favor of pulling out of Gaza and turning it over to the Muslims so that there would be peace in Israel. That was 2005, right?
Oh, wow.
And so they were going to pull out the Jewish settlements. And so I'm listening to this for a while, and after a time, because I'm kind of this way, I did raise my hand, and so I basically said, well, I don't think you ought to do that. I don't think you ought to give Gaza back because, number one, God gave it to you, and so if he gave it to you, you shouldn't give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
God gave it to you. And then I said, and the fact is that God will help you. And I said, that one of these days your back is going to be against the wall. And when that time comes, call upon God and he will help you.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that he ever did. And I've also met with, Jewish ambassadors to the U.S. and told them, I said, you people don't really understand Christianity in the United States, because you have a lot more support among true evangelicals.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, we're about the only support they have, truthfully. And so you should call upon that, because we will be supportive. And we have been supportive, but I didn't convince Ehud Omer, by the way. They obviously gave back Gaza to the Palestinians so they could have peace. And how did that work out?
Yeah, they haven't had
Not
much
really
peace.
that well.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And all the land for peace deals are they will never work.
Yeah.
I mean, because in Islam, Muhammad, it says this in the Quran, that he engaged in a treaty so that, because he was weak. When he got strong, he came back and slaughtered the people that he had an agreement with.
Yeah.
And so when your leader, founder of your religion, uses treaties as a cover for military buildup so that you can come back and kill the people you made the treaty with, he's a liar.
Right.
And it's in Islam that it's okay to lie and to deceive the infidel.
Especially as it relates to jihad, right? Into like
exactly.
a holy war that would ethnically cleanse the earth of Jews and Christians.
They're all for that.
Yeah.
In fact, they're obligated. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, jihad.
Yeah.
To fight for the success of Islam.
Yeah.
So there will never be peace by way of a treaty in Israel that will last. Won't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump, whoever, it's not going to happen. They'll make a treaty if they're weak. Yep. I do think Israel has taken the right step in really hammering all of their neighbors that are attacking them. Lebanon, Iran, Syria to a lesser extent, but Hamas, the Houthis. You basically have to pound them into submission, so where that sensible Muslims say, you know what, this isn't working out that well. Even though we're supposed to replace the Jews, somehow or another, it's not working. And so sensible Muslim says, we need to knock this off. And so they will for 3 or 4 decades. And then a new group of imams will come up and say, we got to go to jihad, And they've been doing this for 1,400 years. It hasn't changed in 1,400 years.
Right.
And it's not going to change.
Which, I mean, to me, in a sense, is one of the proofs of the validity of Scripture. And you see the war between Isaac and Ishmael's seeds has, been going on really all throughout history.
And exactly. He'll be what they call him, a wild donkey of a man, and be at war with his brothers.
Yeah.
But they've fought internally as they are in Gaza right now.
Yeah.
The various clans are fighting with each other now in Gaza, but they will never come to peace with Israel long term until Christ returns.
Yeah.
He will set up his throne in Jerusalem, and then the prophecies of Isaiah. And the kingdom will be restored to David. Yeah. David's son will sit upon the throne in Jerusalem.
Right.
Not in Ghana. Not in Washington, D.C. Jesus is going to come to Jerusalem. Yeah. Because the ancient promises to David and to Abraham are going to be honored. And Jesus wants us to pray for this. And he, because he said, when you pray pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
And the kingdom we're talking about is the kingdom of Jesus restored. In Acts chapter 1, after the resurrection, Jesus was around for 40 days speaking about the kingdom that was to come.
Yep.
The disciples understood it, and so they said to him, Jesus, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Christians? Oh, no, he didn't say that.
No.
He said, are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel?
Yeah.
Are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? And Jesus said, basically, the time is none of your business.
Yep.
Wait in Jerusalem until you've received the power of the Holy Spirit, and then go into all the world, preach the gospel, and teach the world to obey everything that I've commanded you.
Yep.
Now, and I'll take care of the timing. And so the timing is, but when the timing is right, Jesus will restore the kingdom to Israel.
Yeah.
He will restore it to Israel.
Yeah, I think I've heard, more of the replacement theology guys and people that would be amillennial and even post-millennialism is having a pretty big rise.
Absolutely.
With Christian nationalists or some of these guys that are alt-right Christians. Well, I could probably put quotes on some of those phrases. It's God to judge who's in which category. But I've heard it kind of implied like, oh, well, Jesus didn't answer them, so they look how foolish the disciples were that they still thought Israel was going to have the kingdom restored. And I think, well, the context is pretty clear that he's talking with them for 40 days about the kingdom of God. And so they're asking him in light of that context, this honest question, because I don't think he had taught them otherwise. So
that was his main topic after the resurrection.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that was the main thing. Are you at this time going to is this the time?
Yeah.
Right now that you're resurrected, and here we see with you every day, and everybody sees you. I mean, it's clearly they can't kill you, or they can't keep you down.
Exactly.
So is this the time that you're going to restore it? He said, it's not for you to know the day of the hour. It's going to happen, but it's not your business.
Do you think it's helpful for us to see distinctions of like the biblical Israelites or Jews of the Bible times, that the political state, or I should probably say it like this: the biblical category of the Jews in the Old and New Testament, the modern state of Israel, and then like the actual people that are alive that have Jewish DNA. Do you see those as they're all related, but there is some difference between the political nation state and the historic people versus the current people, or you kind of see them lumped all as one and the same?
Well, they're not exactly the same. First of all, Israel as a nation is not only Jewish. There's over 1 million Arab and Muslims and Christians is part of the Israeli state. So the Israeli state and Jewish people is not a one-to-one correspondence.
Right.
But it is the only Jewish state. And it has, I don't know if they have a majority of the Jews in the world now. I think, I don't know if there's more Jews in Israel than there are in the U.S., but they're pretty, have been equal in the past. To say that Israel today, the Jews of Israel, are not the Jews of the Bible. There's no basis for saying that.
Right.
No basis at all. So they are the Jews. They trace their ancestry. I'm waiting for a little more advance in some of the DNA studies. They've been able to find the Cohen through a genetic marker. And so they can tie that particular priestly group back to the original group. But because the Bible does mention, the 12 tribes, 144,000 of each of the tribes. And so clearly somebody, presumably the Lord, is going to know which tribe, even not only that they're Jews, but which tribe of Jews they are.
Wow.
And so because that's going to be reassembled. And, the Revelation describes the 144,000, and it mentions, 12,000 from this tribe, 12,000 from that tribe, 12. And so there will be clear evidence available to God or somebody. Maybe it'll be available to everybody by then.
Yeah.
Maybe the level of genetic study will be, maybe they'll find some bones or something, that they can be certain of, that they can trace back. I mean, a lot of cool stuff is happening with DNA.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, they're the 12 tribes that are mentioned in Revelation.
Yeah.
And so
right.
they're not, so they're going to be there. And so I don't think there's any reason to say they're not.
Right. Do you think that is it all right for Christians in a sense then to have disagreements with the political government of Israel, or have
absolutely.
some critiques? Because I think some criticisms are that, well, you Christians just support Israel to a fault and it doesn't matter what they do. And I don't think people really do. Wiley, I don't think evangelical Christians think that the government of Israel is without fault. Just like in the Bible times, some of the kings were in direct rebellion to God. So they may not be able to support the government in the sense of agreeing or affirming all of their decisions, but there is a way to support them as a people and for their right to exist and to defend themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to say that you support Israel is not the same thing as saying I support God.
Right.
But you shouldn't divorce the two either.
Yeah.
Because if God's got a program that he's working out with the Jews, which he is, then I don't really want to be on the wrong side of that.
Right.
Absolutely. I want to, but does that mean that everything the Israeli government does? Well, you heard me say, Benjamin or Ehud Omer. I thought they were making the wrong decision there.
Yeah.
And so I criticized him to his face, the prime minister of Israel.
Yeah.
But and so I don't think there's any problem with that. And are agreeing that they shouldn't do certain things. I mean, that's all good. But I'll tell you that the Jews and the Christians have the same opponent. And that is the Muslim religion and the Antichrist religion.
Yeah.
I mean, Islam would be one of the Antichrist religions, but it's not the only one. And so the people who are going after the Jews are the same people that are going to be going after us.
Yeah.
And in fact are. And in Islam, they believed, here's the way they think about it. The Jews were the chosen people of God, and he gave them their book, but they didn't keep it. So God rejected the Jews and turned to the Christians and gave them their book, but they didn't keep their book either. And so God rejected the Christians and gave a new book to a new people, the Quran, and Islam is now the successor religion. And so jihad is for the purpose of bringing that about. War is a means for bringing about the end of Judaism and the end of Christianity. And that's the way they've done it for 1,400 years.
Yeah.
To go after those. And when the Jews succeed and when America succeeds, because the Islam thinks of us as a Christian nation.
Right.
I wish that it were so, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't fit their theology, because the Jews are supposed to fade away, and the Christians are supposed to fade away, and Islam is supposed to fill the earth.
Right.
But when Islam is being defeated by the Jews and by the Christians, the little Satan and the great Satan, it disturbs the theology of Islam.
Yeah.
And that's where sensible Muslims say, hey, you know what? What I've been taught, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. And of course, there's even a promise for Ishmael, and so we're even winning the war spiritually, really, by converting a lot of Muslims globally to Christ, right?
Well,
there seems to be a great harvest of Muslims coming in.
There is that, but even to the Arab people, there are great promises of God.
Right.
There are promises that you will be a great nation.
That's right.
Right, goes right along with the promises to Abraham.
Yep.
You will be a great nation.
Yeah.
I was giving a talk once at Tacoma Community College on the origins of the Arab-Israeli conflict. So I put up posters around campus, and I showed up, and it was a public forum. And so I'm giving my talk, a lot of the same stuff I've talked about here, God's promise to the Jews and all of that. Well, in my audience, there were quite a few Arabs, and Arabs from prominent families. So like the son of the defense minister of Syria was there.
Oh, wow.
And high people, sons of high people from Saudi Arabia. And so these guys are all there, and these are people that would be in power today in the Middle East. They were going to Tacoma Community College of all places. Maybe their English wasn't as good, so doing a couple of years at a community college would help them, and then they could go on to a better university. But anyway, I had all these guys, and they're sitting there looking at. I didn't know until afterward when I was talking to them, but one at the end with question and answer, the guy raised his hands. Well, what about in my message, I had already said God made promises to the Arabs as well. And I reiterated the promises that I'll make of you a great nation. And he has made of the Arab nations a great nation.
That's right.
He's given them tremendous wealth and tremendous influence in the world today. And so God has kept his promise to the Arabs that he made back through Abraham, that he will make of them a great nation. They are a great nation. God has kept his word to them, and so he, just like he has to the Jews, he has to the Arabs as well.
Right.
And so I'm good with that. I'm good with the Arabs being great. Make the Arabs great again.
That's right.
That's God's promise.
That's amen.
And I'm good with making America great too.
Yeah, that's right. We want to have great nations that honor and fear the Lord and enjoy his blessing. That's right. Oh, what would you say to people that have been listening maybe to different voices and they've been getting confused and they've been kind of noticing that they're starting to get all these Jews run the world and they've got Mossad and they've got sleeper agents everywhere and they're running Hollywood and they're corrupting the world and they've noticed that their heart is maybe getting overtaken by even a disdain or a hatred for the Jewish people. What would you speak to somebody that's kind of been kind of in, like, I don't know which way to go? Should I support Israel or should I view them as like even Antichrist?
Yeah, well, that has been the anti-Semitic trope for centuries. That the Jews control the banking, the Rothschilds, and they control the banking, and now they're through AIPAC and all these other groups, they're controlling America and all of that. I just don't believe that. I don't believe it's true. I don't believe it ever has been true. Yes, there have been Jewish bankers. Okay, there have been Christian bankers too. But I think it's a false narrative to say that Israel is controlling the United States. The United States, we have our own foreign policy. And by the way, our foreign policy for a very long time has been to deal with the Muslims. The reason Thomas Jefferson formed the U.S. Navy, we're at our 250th anniversary of the U.S. Navy. Well, that and the Marine Corps, part of the same. They have the same commander. That was to deal with the Muslims because they had taken about 1 million Christians as slaves in the Mediterranean and the Barbary states and all that. And so, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli in the Marine song. Well, the shores of Tripoli was to deal with the Muslims who were enslaving Christians from Europe and from the United States. So our military foreign policy was really founded on the idea of containing Islam and not letting them control Christian, enslaved Christians. It was known as gunboat diplomacy. There were times when we sailed our gunboats into the harbor at Istanbul, trained the guns on the Sultan's, palace, right, which is right close to the water there, and said, by the way, you've been mistreating some of our missionaries and some of our Christian schools around, and we'd like to discuss that with you. Well, when you have your gunboat sitting out there aimed at my palace, I can be very reasonable.
Right.
And so we have had American foreign policy has been very much regulated by protecting Christian interests, including in the Middle East. And we have a long history of that. I forget the guy's name who wrote Faith and Power in U.S. Foreign Policy or something like that. Anyway, where he details a lot of that as it relates to the Middle East. So, unfortunately, in Afghanistan, we went after the Muslims there because they attacked us at 9/11.
Right.
Well, that wasn't controlled by the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
That was controlled by American interest, and we went after them, the Muslims in Afghanistan, and defeated them until Biden basically pulled out in a terrible decision there. But that was, we of course we say, oh, we're not going after Islam. Oh no, we were 100% going after Islam. We call it radical Islam, but we were going after them, and we were successful in defeating them. That's the same formula that's been used for centuries. Unfortunately, we didn't really have the Christian part of it down because we didn't force them, the Afghans, to allow Christian missionaries like we should have. We should have said, look, we'll protect you against these jihadis, but you have to allow Christians the freedom of religion. We didn't do that in Afghanistan, unlike every other time. So that was a major mistake that was made in Afghanistan, in my opinion.
So there seems to be a real spiritual aspect to anti-Semitism too, and this kind of like people almost get infected by like a virus, if you will, spiritually, mentally, where they, you can just see certain people, they just have so much hatred towards Israel, and it just and you might not agree with a variety of different countries, governments, or policies, or morals, but then all of a sudden it's like people get this thing about the Jews are trying to control and ruin the world, and then they're just like filled with spite and hatred, and even calling for the annihilation of Israel or the Jewish people, and it's kind of like, or they're supporting, you have some of these right-wing Christian groups supporting like more of a Muslim, like they're more supportive of Muslims than Jews. And I think we should love Muslims and want to reach them with the gospel as Christians.
Absolutely.
The government has a role to protect us against, bear the sword to protect us.
Right.
But as Christians, we should love and want to reach people with the gospel, of course. But then
and we do.
Yeah. But then there's it's just interesting to me that people can be that hateful towards Israel. So how do we combat the spiritual? Is there any good resources, or just is it getting more exposed to good Bible teaching? What's the answer to the spiritual battle over it?
If I could just come to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Politically speaking, the anti-Israel stuff comes from a misguided "Make America Great Again" or "America First." And so, and against endless foreign wars.
Right.
So they opposed the activity in Afghanistan because it took so long. It goes on for 20 years, so that's an endless foreign war.
Right.
The war in Iraq was particularly bad. It wasn't really fought for any Christian purpose.
Yeah.
To protect Kuwait and all of that. So it didn't really have the good quality spiritual backing like I think Afghanistan did, because they attacked us because we were Christian. That's why they attacked us on 9/11. So the endless foreign wars have been fought in Muslim areas.
Right.
What they call endless foreign wars.
Yeah.
And so they oppose that. Well, they see that we have also fought to protect Israel. I wouldn't say we've done a lot for Israel in most of the wars.
Right.
Really, only since in more recent years have we been strongly supportive of Israel. We didn't very much. Truman recognized Israel, and that was valuable. And we have given them some support, primarily against Soviet expansion back in the days. We armed Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, Greece, but all of that was anti-Soviet. That was the southern flank of NATO back in the day, and fellow nations. So we did arm Israel, but we armed Jordan as well. And Iran and Iraq.
Yeah.
They were part of our southern flank of NATO as exposure to that. John Foster Dulles put that together. But so we have armed Israel to some extent for that purpose. With the end of the Soviet Union, a different threat has emerged, and that is of Islam.
Right.
And so Israel is a bulwark against Islam. And so to me, it's reasonable for us to support Israel as a way of containing Islam, because the only way they'll be contained is militarily. You have to basically bludgeon them about the head and shoulders to let them know that their military adventurism is not going to accomplish their purposes, that we're not going to be pounded into submission by Islam. And so Israel has understood that because, they're the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
But we're part of the spear as well. And so I'm all good with people acting to contain Islam, because jihad, the fifth pillar of Islam, is a serious geopolitical problem.
Yeah.
And it happens to have very strong spiritual overtones.
Right.
So so it's not that we are engaging in an endless foreign war to support Israel, is that Israel is joining us in protecting us against the mutual threats. And so it isn't AIPAC that is getting us involved in this, or it's not the Jewish banker lobby or whatever, Goldman Sachs or whoever.
Yeah.
It is clear-thinking geopolitical planners who say we have to contain those who want to do us harm.
Yeah.
That's what it is, in my opinion.
Yeah. So with the spiritual side of it, how would you combat that in our churches or with people that are being more indoctrinated by these different it seems crazy to even say it, but pro-Nazi voices, pro-Hitler voices, kind of replacement theology at the nth degree?
Well, if you have to recognize that God still has a plan for the Jews. He hasn't abandoned them.
Right.
And so the scriptures that relate to that form the bulwark against that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the amillennialists, the postmillennialists, they have been. If you believe those two doctrines, you are about 40% anti-Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the numbers are among young evangelicals.
Right.
About a quarter of young evangelicals are now pro-Palestinian.
Yeah.
Which makes zero sense at any level. At no level does that make any actual sense. Not geopolitically. Certainly doesn't make sense spiritually.
Yeah.
Because the Palestinians, generally speaking, there are some Christian Palestinians, but generally speaking, they are Muslim, and they are not going to be favorable toward Christians.
Yeah.
And so I think recognizing, biblically speaking, God has promises to the Jews. He has promises of national Israel and the restoration of national Israel. In the end time prophecies like Zechariah 14, Jerusalem is going to be surrounded.
Yeah.
Half of it taken captive. And then Christ will come to rule. And by the way, when Christ rules, it would keep on reading in Zechariah 4, it talks about Jerusalem being surrounded, then God coming. What does God make them do, the nations of the world? They have to go up to Jerusalem every year to celebrate what biblical feast? The Feast of Tabernacles. They're required to celebrate the feast. The nations of the world are required to go up to Jerusalem. And the Bible says in Zechariah 14, if they won't go, God said they won't have any rain. You don't have any rain, you don't have any food.
Right.
You need rain.
Yeah.
And so God will coerce the nations of the world in Zechariah 14 to go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, Jesus, but he will do it in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That's what Zechariah 14 says. After he rescues Israel, rescues the Jews, the world, all the nations of the world, are going to have to recognize. And what does the Feast of Tabernacles recognize? God is dwelling with his people. He dwells with them in the wilderness, the pillar of fire by night, the cloud by day. Those are symbols of the Feast of Pentecost.
Right.
And it's a giving of the law when God writes them not on tablets of stone, but on the tablets of your heart.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to have to observe that, And the fact that he will have to coerce them tells me that even when Christ is ruling from Jerusalem, there's going to be people that say, I don't know if I really want to do that.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, yeah, you want to do that. Because if you don't, you'll have no rain.
Yeah.
And they say, you know what? it's making more sense to me all the time.
Yeah.
And it encourages me that even when Christ is in charge, there's going to be dubious characters out there that have to be coerced.
Yeah. Right. For me, Romans 11 has been a really big,
Huge.
I've heard a lot of charismatics and Pentecostals over the years, when a minister falls, they quote Romans 11 and say, well, God can still restore him because the gifts and callings of God are irrevocable. But if you look at the translate, it's a pretty bad application of the scripture, because the context is about the restoration of Israel, and he's speaking of the patriarchs and the promises given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to ethnically Jewish people, to this the nation of Israel. And he says, as far as the gospel is concerned, in Romans 11:28, they are enemies for your sake, but as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs, for God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. So to me, it's clear that he's saying all the promises to Israel are irrevocable. And yes, they're antagonistic. They're enemies of the gospel in the sense that, like you said, many of them are secular, atheists. They're not embracing Christ, but we've got to remember them and honor them as heirs, or those that are elected. They're loved on account of the patriarchs. So even though they're antagonistic against what we believe about Christ, we are to have a posture of love and honor towards them, because we're grafted into them. Of course, that's the whole context of Romans 11.
Yeah, because God is faithful to his
promise. Yeah, he's going to keep all the promises to them, all the gifts. What are the gifts, the calling? Well, that they're God's chosen people, the land, the covenants of blessing. All these things are the gifts and callings that are irrevocable. So even in the new covenant, from the Apostle Paul himself, we have this real strong defense of why we should support Israel. And of course, Jews and Israelis and every other nation, they're not going to receive eternal life apart from receiving Christ as the Messiah, and Lord. But that's to be our posture towards them, is to win them through serving God, loving them, honoring them.
Yeah, for God's sake.
Yeah, for God's sake, absolutely.
Because God keeps his promises.
Yes.
He keeps his promises to Israel, just like he keeps his promises to you and me.
Yeah.
And I believe in a promise-keeping God.
I think that's a really good way to frame it, because it's the biblical way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. God keeps his promises. He made a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, like you said, like we started this whole conversation. He made a promise to them, and it was to the children of promise, not to all their natural children necessarily, but to the children of promise.
Yeah, Abraham had a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Many sons had Father Abraham.
That's right, and I'm one of them. Oh, yeah. Well, it's been great to have your wisdom, your biblical knowledge, your historical knowledge, geopolitical knowledge, sharing with us today, and I hope this is helpful. Do you have any, before we wrap up here, do you have any recommendations for any top resources, whether it's books, authors, thinkers, maybe I don't know if any of them do YouTube videos now, or anything like resources you would point people to if they want more helpful information on this?
Well, I hear they got a good preacher at Sonrise Christian Center, so they ought to show up and hear some sermons.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, I don't. Not really. I mean, there's many good books.
For sure.
And good, clear thinking people. And I think there's probably more of those than there are the other. But we're just not accustomed to the anti-Israel group having such influence as they do today.
Yeah, it's really raised its head. I was always intrigued, and I haven't read widely on the topic. I want to learn and study more in this area, but about how Spurgeon and some of the Reform guys that seems like they would have been more predisposed to replacement theology, really started embracing the literal millennium, and were really convinced before Israel, became a nation, or it looked like it could maybe happen for sure geopolitically, that from their study of the scriptures, that there would be a regathering of the Jewish people in the state of Israel one day. And I think it really seems like a sovereign move of God to bring some of these groups and some of these people to emerge from the groups they were within.
Well, my mother was in Bible college in the 1930s, and she was taught that God would someday restore the nation of Israel. Because people who believed the Bible believed that would happen. Yeah. And so, Israel was restored as a nation in 1948. I was born in 1949. But she lived to see what she was taught in the Bible, that Israel became a nation. This was after 2,000 years. But people who believe the Bible have been preaching this for a long time, because that's what the Bible says. He's going to restore the nation of Israel, and it fits part of their prophetic plan.
Right.
And so, I would just say, just stick with that. Stick with the Bible and what it says. God has a plan. He's working it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Stick with the Bible. That is a good that's a good reminder for us all, but it's amazing how easy it is to depart from it. Well,
Israel is rebellious. I mean, there's no doubt about that, but that's kind of the problem they've had for, I'm thinking like going on 3,500 years.
Right? That's right.
Or more. And so it's the ups and downs. They've been in a long down cycle, and they're still in a down cycle, spiritually speaking. But I think progress is being made. I was interested that Netanyahu the other day, I heard him say something I never heard a Jewish leader say. He referred to God as the Almighty. That's the way George Bush used to refer to God.
Okay.
That was just interesting. George Bush would, he wouldn't say God. He would say the Almighty. And to hear Netanyahu say that, I don't know whether he had the same speechwriter or whatever, but I took note of that. The Almighty was, and he's been conscious of the help of the Almighty. And in that, he might just be a political person playing to an audience, but I hope that he means it, just like I hope our president means it when he says God has spared his life for a purpose. I hope he means that. And God knows. But anyway, it was interesting to hear Benjamin Netanyahu speak of the Almighty.
Almighty.
In a world of conflict, it's good to be connected to the Almighty.
That's right.
Not just kind of mighty, but the
right,
Almighty.
The Almighty, the very top,
the
most
than the
Almighty. That's right,
the
highest of all. Are you familiar with Michael Spiegel? He wrote a book more recently called The Fathers on the Future.
No.
And he, I think he's Baptist, but he's basically, I just started the book, so I'm not that deep into it, but his book's called The Fathers on the Future, a second century eschatology for the 21st century church. And he basically mines the work of Irenaeus from the 2nd century, and he's trying to prove, because he supports the view of the millennium and is a premillennialist, that we can substantiate from one of the earliest church fathers that this was taught and embraced. It wasn't an invention of the Schofield Bible,
right?
But that it predates that. And even though through a lot of history, different centuries, theologians drifted from this view, that if we go back to I guess is Irenaeus the first of the church fathers, really?
To do that well. I mean, he's the first one to give us anything political. He developed his theology of government, so he was the first one to do that. And he was, the Apostle John discipled Polycarp. Polycarp discipled Irenaeus.
Right.
So I mean, you're right back at the beginning.
About as close as you can get to the beginning.
Just about as close as you can get without being one of the Bible people.
Right. So anyway, that's a resource that I've been starting to enjoy, but I'm not too deep into it yet. But I think it's really well laid out.
Well, quite a few of the church fathers do talk about the Jews and the Old Covenant versus the New Covenant. That was their main focus. I'm not thinking too much about how many covered the subject of national Israel.
Right.
But they do. I have a book called Chaos and the End of Time that's based on Daniel chapter 2. Where it says the people will not remain united, but the final kingdom of God comes, destroys the kingdoms of man. But the church fathers wrote a lot about that kind of thing. The restoration of the kingdom. They fully expected the kingdom replacing all earthly kingdoms. That's the statue of the head of gold.
Right.
Replacing all earthly kingdoms. So the kingdom of God is coming.
And they had a consensus on the Antichrist, a literal Antichrist too. Yeah. Literal fulfillment of Bible prophecy for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate your time, and I think this is going to give people some good ammunition against anti-Semitism and to look through the scriptures. And I mean, it's obviously a lot to cover, and it's something you got to really dig deep to learn and understand. And so I think that's a good call for us to get back to the Bible.
Well, next time you do your trip to Israel, I hope a lot of people show up and go with you. Because you do learn a lot when you go.
I've never been yet, so I'm looking forward to going for my first time.
You need to go right away.
Yeah.
The sooner you can get there, the better.
All right. Thank you.